Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Demons from Outer Space, which I'm not sure of the number. Let me look that up real quick.
It's episode 140, I'm sure, because I just the last one today. Edited the last one today.
My God.
Hi, I'm Bill Worster, a.k.a. Zazubaar. I'm here, too.
On the fucking ball for once. All right, episode 140, and we're finally starting Samurai Month here on the Demons from Outer Space. Are you excited, Bill? Are you excited to do a deeper dive into the samurai genre?
We are unsheathing one of our two swords. I know that much about samurai. They have two swords that represent their samurai-ness.
Yes, this is going to be an interesting journey because this is a genre, or well, yeah, I guess genre would be the right word that Bill has.
Yeah, it's a genre.
Yeah, there's like different. Anyway, the samurai.
There's space. I know there's space samurai and oceanic samurai.
Point being, this is
underground samurai.
Point being, this is an area in which Bill has very limited exposure, and one in which I have slightly better exposure. So this is going to be a nice journey, and we're going to start with, as I announced at the end of the last episode, Samurai Jack. Now, I thought it would be a great idea to start with Samurai Jack because for me, and I think many people of my generation, Samurai Jack was what introduced me to even the concept of a samurai. This was in 2001. I had never heard of a fucking samurai. I didn't know what that is. I didn't even realize that my anime were from Japan yet. And
Japan was. You didn't know that they essentially own your whole country.
I knew what Japan was by virtue of being a Godzilla fan. I didn't know shit about it though. I didn't know shit about it though, except that their names were hard to pronounce, and so
that's everybody's introduction.
And so Samurai Jack, as I stated, was sort of my introduction to sort of that feudal Japanese aesthetic, and
his name is very easy to pronounce.
Well, we never learned his actual name, but
right? I was gonna bring that up as one of my early points.
But we'll get into that. So yeah, Samurai Jack. We're not, obviously this is a long-running series. We're only going to be talking about the first 3 episodes, which was bundled together back in the day, as so many opening episodes for cartoons are, as a premiere quote-unquote movie. And I had the VHS of this and watched it until it literally wouldn't play anymore. So I actually didn't get a chance to rewatch these 3 episodes before this review, but it's not a problem because I've seen them so many times.
You wore that tape out, so...
Yeah. Bill, I guess the big question to start off with is, what was it like, man? How was your reaction to watching Samurai Jack for the first time? I remember very clearly my first time watching Samurai Jack, but I was also 6 years old, so it'll be much more, I think it'll be enlightening to hear it from...
No, it was the same experience. I was laying on the floor in my living room, my mom yelling at me. I was eating cookies at 10 o'clock in the morning. That's how I did it. Now, yeah, so I watched this for the first time. I've been exposed to bits and pieces of Samurai Jack, like, over the years. Like, and by bits and pieces, I mean, like, commercials for it in between other cartoons I was watching, like late-night binges of Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball GT, or even, like, Family Guy. There would be little commercials for Samurai Jack and little bits of it. And I got the aesthetic thing, and I knew that the guy who created the first Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon was involved. That was pretty clear from the animation style. Yeah. And I understood, like, I understood the rough concept.
Yeah, did you ever catch any snippets? Because I know there were tons of cartoons that I never really watched growing up, but I would catch, like snippets of them, either like
now
before...
Now that I've gone back to these first 3, I'm pretty sure I saw at least a piece of the final action scene of the 3rd episode. Mm-hmm. Because I remember, like, when you see the masses of drones coming over the hill, I was like, I feel like I've seen this before.
Yeah.
And obviously I saw, like, that bit where Aku is like, I'm going to throw you through time! Like, that was on every commercial for the show back in the day. So I remembered that very vividly. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like I was completely unfamiliar with it and this was like a blind viewing. But what it was me going, oh, this is what this is really about, okay. And I really definitely got into the story a lot more than I ever thought I even would have. I really didn't understand how in depth it was. That was the thing that really surprised me from the onset. I figured the stuff later on that they recently did was probably more in depth because it was more exclusively for adults. But I didn't think that going back to the very beginning, it would be like, oh, they're really gonna flesh out this universe and this character in like excruciating detail, and not excruciating in that it was unpleasant because. Damn, this was fucking cool, man. I'm very sad that I didn't get to experience this as a kid because I would have loved it. And it would have been very unique, and maybe I would have got into the samurai genre at large a little earlier. And damn, yeah, this I missed out.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned how surprisingly sort of deep it is for a children's show, especially of that era. Mm-hmm. Because you're right. The most recent stuff they did, season 5, is definitely more so and more adult, obviously, and goes into sort of things a bit deeper than they were able to do with the initial run. But those original 4 seasons were always surprisingly and very subtly mature for children's entertainment. It's very similar to Batman TAS.
I got a very Batman TAS vibe from it.
I tend to throw some what's the word I'm looking for? Acknowledgement towards shows like Samurai Jack and Batman TAS that I watched growing up for why I think playing a big part in why I wound up being sort of an intelligent, nerdy individual. Because they treated their audiences not like kids. They had to play down to the audience a little bit, if for no other reason.
Well, just to make it accessible, but you still tell stories that adults can enjoy and get into on a deeper level, and something that kids can get into on a deeper level while still getting engaged in the action and the characters.
Yeah, and looking back,
it excels at that.
And looking back, all of my favorite cartoons back then did that to some degree that I was just not conscious of at the time. Like a few years ago, when I revisited some episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog, I was like, this is way more like adult and actually disturbing than I remember. Shit like that. Yeah, I'm glad you had such a strong reaction to it. I think my next question was going to be, do you understand the hype now? I guess you answered that already.
Yeah, I mean, especially because of how unique it is. I almost want to know like what Gendy Tartakovsky worked on before this. That was it Dexter's Lab that got him the kind of free reign to basically do what seems like whatever he wants. Because this universe is, it really feels like a singular vision. It almost felt like George Lucas in Star Wars back in the day, where it's something that maybe not everybody understands until they see it.
Yeah, so Gendy Tartakovsky, him and his family moved to America from Russia when he was very young. He had, previous to this, of course, everybody knows that he created Dexter's Lab, which was based on which was based on a short animated thing that he had done in college. He also helped, I believe he helped Craig McCracken, who's a college friend of his, with the Powerpuff Girls a little bit. I know that for some span of time, I'm not sure how long, in like the mid-90s, he got to do a little work actually on Batman TAS, but that was just like, he was just a young like staff animator, just doing
early on, or when it was the new Batman Adventures.
I'm not sure on the years.
The new Batman Adventures seems almost more like his animation style, now that I think about it.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure that wasn't his direct influence, but I don't know. It just it seems more in line with his style. But
he was
either way that makes sense.
Yeah, he was super like up and coming in the industry at that point, so I don't think he would have had any influence over the way the show looked, whether it was during that period or not. And he actually, he went to college for this shit. He can draw like all kinds of detailed things. It's just that his art style his preferred art style is very simplistic. But yeah, and then after this, of course, he went on to do the Clone Wars animated series, which we have talked about. He did the short-lived series Symbionic Titan for Cartoon Network, and most recently broke into feature film directing with the Hotel Transylvania movies, which
they're making a third one. Is he directing it again?
As far as I know. And then I remember when I saw the first one in theaters.
Right? Is that the idea? It's like Hotel Transylvania goes Hawaiian or something?
Yeah, I think they're taking like a vacation to Hawaii or some shit. I don't know. Uh, I saw the first movie in theaters.
Just thinking about like watching this earlier today, and it's a cartoon. There's still some somewhat funny kind of silly elements, but you still got like Jack getting ripped apart by these like these blades, and there's still blood. And he gets covered in the oil of his enemies and shit. And, then you
Samurai
just think
Jack,
about like Dracula taking around his grandson, trying to get him to scare kids.
Yeah, Samurai Jack is as a series balances a lot of action and comedy, and when they don't do it well is probably the weakest episodes of the series. I can think of like
I can see that being a problem going forward.
I can think of the handful of episodes that I don't like, and they're usually comedy episodes that just don't work. But then there's also really fantastic comedy episodes that are hilarious and wonderful. So it's it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
Usually with comedy, it tends to be an overall issue that like sometimes it lands and sometimes it doesn't. It comes down to personal taste because that's how all humor works out in the end. Is if you think it's funny.
Yeah, but comedy doesn't really play a part in this premiere movie until the second part, and so let's come back to that.
Yeah. There's a very like big tone shift like halfway through.
Yeah, so I want to go in.
Through.
I want to go in very specifically and start this discussion with episode I. And yes, all the episodes of Samurai Jack are done in Roman numerals because fancy, I guess. Episode I, the beginning, as it were. What a fucking wonderful beginning to a series. What a fucking perfect way to just grab your attention, and it's so well done. I love that the majority of the episode has like no dialogue, and it's all done. I was gonna
say that struck me a lot.
It's all just this. It's all done through this like huge musical montage, and just action shots, and Jack traveling the world and doing all kinds of kung fu and learning to fight with these various.
He learns
styles.
Every single fighting style.
He learns
every single civilization.
He learns everything, which is why the title Samurai Jack is sort of a misnomer, because he's not really a samurai.
He's everything Jack.
Yeah, well, he's also a member of the royal family, so that's not really samurai. But anyway,
well, it's also like I guess part of the reason why he's called Jack, and I'm sure I'm not like saying something that hasn't been said before, is he's kind of a jack of all trades, jack of all fighting styles.
Yeah, I think that is part of the idea. But
even though like you said, like you implied earlier, that's not his real name. And that did come as a shock when that happened, when the guys who he meets up with in the future just start calling him Jack, and I guess we'll talk about it, but it was definitely a little weird. I didn't expect that. But the first episode is very different from all that. It's pretty much exclusively told as like an old Chinese or any kind of Asian myth, where it's like, a long time ago there was an emperor and there was an evil wizard, and the emperor did this to stop the wizard, and there was this consequence, and then the wizard finally got his fucking revenge. Mm-hmm. And now this young man has to, live in this terrible world and struggle to try and become the kind of man that can overcome the evil wizard and bring honor back to his family and his homeland. So, definitely not something we haven't seen before, but it's done in a very classy and unique and cinematic way that I definitely haven't seen in a cartoon of this era even before.
Yeah. How did you respond, since we've gotten into this territory now? Probably the fan favorite character of Samurai Jack, but I would say a large portion of the fandom isn't even Jack himself. It's fucking Aku. How did you respond?
He's essentially like the host of the show. It's almost like the Brack show back in the day, but with fucking Aku.
In a weird way, yes. And later on,
I loved that. It was like I said, unique, and it gave it this fun twist. And
yeah, later on in the series, they start to. Well, they have to, because pure evil villain is only interesting for so long. So they start having to put some comedy aspects into his personality, and he changes a lot by the time we get to where he ends up by the end of the show. But in season 1,
because he's kind of a force of nature in these first 3 with a personality, but we don't really know anything about what the hell's underneath all the fire.
Yeah, but in episode, I've said before that I don't think Aku is ever scarier in the entirety of the franchise than he is in just this first episode. Holy fucking shit! First of all, total like kaiju attack sequence early on when he shows up and starts just destroying everything, and just Mako's voice, and it's all so well
The
done.
voice plays a big part in giving him his personality and making him more than just any number of typical big monstrous evil wizard demon bad guys from this kind of fantasy. You know, like you watch any number of fantasy martial arts movies from China from the 70s or 80s, and you can find a villain like this. But it's the fact that it's Mako's voice and the fact that he has a personality, and the fact that he has a unique design. All those things come together to make you go like, okay, this character is more than just the bad guy we have to overcome. He's a draw of his own accord. And his perspective on things is worth listening to and interesting in and of itself. Yeah, no, he definitely struck me in a unique way. Especially, I love what he has like he's almost like Lord Zed, back from the old Power Rangers show, because the best parts of the old Power Rangers show were when Lord Zed was sitting up on his fucking roost on the moon, just going, "Ooh, I'm so mad! I'm gonna get those fucking pieces of shit." And he would plot and freak out and yell at his minions, and then he would and then some comedy thing would happen, and he would stew over it. And those were the best. Weird. Those were the best parts. And
it was always weird because Lord Zed was shown to be so powerful whenever he did do any like remote bit of fighting that he could probably just go down there and kick everybody's ass, but he just sat on the moon.
It's all about the execution of the thing, and that's how Aku feels about it as well. It's a villain with some class and some moxie, not just a blunt instrument.
Well, the interesting thing about Aku and Jack's relationship, and they explore this more as the show goes on, Aku is literally invincible and can kill pretty much anybody except for Jack, because Jack has the sword, this magical item that's the one thing on Earth that can harm him. Mm-hmm. And so Aku is sort of forced to sort of sit in his castle for the majority of the series and just keep sending like bounty hunters and henchmen to try and kill Jack, to no avail. And he tries some other more creative solutions at a few points. But it's this interesting dynamic, because if Jack didn't have the sword, Aku could pretty much kill him instantly, and all of that traveling around the world and all that training he did wouldn't mean fucking shit.
Right, but I like that he had to do that first before he could actually get the sword.
Right.
I thought that was clever, and I thought that it was like this nice cyclical thing, because when they first have Aku attack, and he kidnaps the Emperor and enslaves him, and that's Jack's mother, right? It's not just like some random.
Oh yeah, that's the mom.
Okay,
yeah.
So she whisks him away and sends him off with the guy on the boat, and she takes the sword to the monastery.
Yeah, that scene where they get reunited into bed is a really wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, the whole episode is just filled with those really emotional, epic moments that come from any number of classic literature or cinema, and the fact that it's done in this, over the top but still kind of gritty style of animation. It's just, like I said, unique is the word, and ever engrossing is the word, even without too much dialogue. Like when Jack finally talked, it was weird. I was like, oh, that's his voice. Like, really? It grew on me. But when he first opened his mouth, it was a bit like when Isaac Clarke talked in Dead Space. I was like, I don't know if I want him to talk now. He was cooler when he was stoic and silent. But no, like I said, the voice grew on me, especially when he starts bantering with the dogs and shit.
It's always a little shocking when Jack speaks, though, because throughout the series he has very little dialogue. Voice actor Phil Lamar.
He strikes me as a kind of Mad Maxy type guy.
Yeah, voice actor Phil Lamar, who you might also know from Justice League and Futurama. He always joked that it was like the best role in the world to play, because he would walk in on an episode and have like 2 lines of dialogue, and then the rest of the episode would just be him, the character walking around like running around fighting and shit.
Right. It is very old school cinema. I mean, if you watch old movies, 99 out of 100 people who aren't familiar with them, like just kind of general public, will complain that there's just stretches of silence where there's nothing happening. But there's a lot happening, and that's what this kind of show proves by exaggerating it in animation. Like there's so much detail, and it's not just the action. it's everything. You know, it's the little intricacies of the characters, even the comedy. You know, that one dog keeps drooling, and you can kind of see it, and it's going into drinks and everything. And there's that one dog that has the fucking hat going over his eyes, and there's a lot going on. So
I'm glad you mentioned, just to step back for a minute, when we were talking about Aku, you mentioned the character design, and definitely
that was the first thing that struck me, like when they do that turnaround. And he's just got, like, the bared teeth. And at first I was a little bit like, what the hell is he? Like I was like, is he a monster? Is he a dude who's become a monster? But it doesn't really matter, I guess. Like, probably all of the above.
There's an origin story given in season 3.
Oh, okay, great. I'm glad they get there, but it's not crucial at this point. Like, he's just like I said initially, he just comes off as a force of nature. But then they start to give him a little personality as we see the world that he builds. Fucking ads of him drinking soda killed me when I first saw them.
Yeah, that was great. But yeah, the you never forget that face. It's such a wonderful design, and I'd say that all the design work in the show is wonderful. I suppose you noticed, or maybe you didn't actually. I think this is more noticeable in future episodes when Jack's just like walking around in nature. But oftentimes the like backdrops are completely like hand painted, and then you just have like these 2D characters walking around in them. It's a very
That's awesome.
It's a very unique look.
There was a lot of really interesting use of, like panoramic kind of scenery shifting in this first episode, where boats were moving across horizons, or Jack was riding on a horse, or any number of different ways to cleverly and visually, and in a visually interesting way, kind of move us through time. I love stuff that does that well. It can be very awkward to recount somebody's entire life story in a movie or in like a very short amount of time, because we don't really feel like we get to know them at any one point in their life. Like, they're just kind of we just get like a general smattering. And this does such a good job at that. Largely just because he's finding different ways of punching people, but we see him become more adept at that, and we definitely see him mature. Just visually, and that's really awesome.
And what I think the reason it works so well is that they're not just showing us, his life and him growing up. They establish early on this big important mission that he has to carry out, and then we just see him struggling his entire life to complete this mission. And so by the time he goes back to Japan near the end of the first episode and saves his dad from the henchmen, all you want to see is him go to that fucking castle and fucking cut Aku in fucking half. Like, that's all you want. And so, they do a great job of just putting you in Jack's corner right at the beginning, just really selling you on that.
He's a very easy character to root for, because you see him, he wants to do right from the very start, and then he gets everything taken away from him. He works really hard to get good at everything. And then he goes back to do what he think he has to do,
Yeah. Another specific aspect I want to shout out when it comes to how wonderful the look of the show is that it has an amazing grasp on how to use color to its advantage. Obviously the most obvious example, Jack dressed in all white, Aku, a big mass of black goo, essentially. The sort of purple look of like the crystal caves where the slaves are digging, to the green mist, to the inside of Aku's lair that's all like these red rocks that look like fire. It's all very wonderfully handled. What about the music? The music in Samurai Jack is always really unique and interesting. How did you think the music worked?
Great theme song off the bat. Fucking, you got that killer intro by Aku, which obviously sets everything up in a really snarky and fun way, but also in a very cinematic way, because it's Mako's voice. I mean, it reminds me of watching Conan back in the day, and just being immediately into it, because it was like, Conan sits on the throne with a troubled brow, and it's like that. It's so awesome.
I don't know if you.
But then it's like
noticed.
Back to the Past, Samurai Jack. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed in the credits or if you already knew this, but do you know who sings the opening theme song?
No.
It's Will.I.Am.
Oh, that's awesome.
Pre my humps will I am.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a great theme song, and it definitely does a good job of, because that intro by Aku, helped by the voice of Mako, is like super traditional old samurai movie or any kind of old kind of fantasy movie, and then you just have this like fucking modern day hip hop rap song to establish the culture clash of Jack being thrown into the future as established by Aku, which is all Blade Runner-y and kind of Star Wars-y.
It's really well written too, that intro. I don't know if people who don't write know this, but when you're trying to write just like a short blurb like that basically explains the whole series, it's really hard to do because you'll always like want to over explain things and it gets too long, and it's always hard to find like the right balance and at the same time not make it feel like you're like a Grimm's fairy tale where it's like, and then this happened, you know what I mean? Like,
usually you want to have it being done for a story reason, like the very telling of the story is kind of part of the point, you know?
Yeah. And it works in Samurai Jack's favor because, you know, season 5 is the only season that's like serialized to the degree that it is. There are like 2-parters here and there throughout the first 4 seasons. But for the most part, it's super episodic, and you're supposed to be able to pick up any episode and just like get it. And so that's what the intro does. It tells you the premise, and then you just get dropped into a new environment with Jack going on.
So is this 3-parter kind of unique in the sense that it's the only one where it's like, this part's done, now we're on to the next part of the story?
In the original 4 seasons, yeah, there's a couple other 2-parters that I can think of.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, it's mostly adventure of.
Now Jack's moving on. It's like the Incredible Hulk show. Like he's like,
it's very Incredible Hulk, actually. It's also a little Quantum Leap with the whole trying to time travel home thing.
Does he ever actually time travel again, like to the past, or like not his past, or like, you know, back or forward? Or is he just moving around the world of this future world by Aku?
Well, not to ruin the ending of season 5, but he does time travel again once. But for the vast majority of the future of the show, he's stuck in the future.
Okay, because that's more interesting to me. I want to see what this world looks like.
Yeah. Oh, and you do in great detail. And then in season 5, there's like a huge time jump, and you get to see what the effects of being in that world for so long have done to Jack's psyche.
Damn it! I'm gonna have to watch all this show tonight. What are you doing to me, Dylan? The only reason I stopped earlier was because I got up early because I wanted to make sure I got it done. So I got up at like 11 and I watched all 3 episodes. So then I napped and then I did other things. So had I not, I probably would have just been binging this all day had I not had other things to do.
That's great. That's exactly the reaction that I would have hoped for.
It's just one of those shows where it keeps going. How about this? How about this? How about this? And I love stuff like that where they're just constantly introducing new ideas. We don't stagnate. We don't just have the same 3 people sitting in a room every fucking episode bullshitting about their problems. We have just, you know, intrigue and discovering new things and pushing the limits of our characters and aliens and robots and just all kinds of wild ideas.
Yeah, you should at some point get your hands on the box set, because if you think the animation style looks good now, you should see it when it's restored in 1080p.
I should watch it legally. No, just JK. Ha ha ha.
Well, watch it all illegally first, and by the end of it, hopefully you'll be like, I gotta own this shit. And anyway, so yeah.
If they had done like if they had never done season 5, would you have been cool with them doing like a movie conclusion?
That was in the cards for a very long time. Yendi kept trying.
I feel like that would have been just as awesome. Now that I've seen parts of it, I'm like, this would have been killer on the big screen.
I kind of wish that the last episode of season 5 had been longer and been made kind of like a TV movie, honestly, because one of the problems with it is that there's a lot of stuff they have to tie up in 30 minutes, and it all comes across a little rushed just because it's very fast-paced.
Yeah, it feels like every time Stephen Moffat had to end a section of his Doctor Who run.
Yeah, and it all just comes down to he only had 10 episodes to finish the series, and that was the agreement he made with Adult Swim. And honestly, I think he spent a little too much time in the middle of the season on certain subplots. But I'm getting way ahead of myself now. We're talking about the premiere movie here. Mm-hmm. But no, for years he had tried to get there was always talk about maybe doing a movie. There was talk about a live action movie or animated movie, and
Oh,
it just
don't
never.
do that. That's no good.
Yeah, but it never got off the ground in any form. For a while, the IDW comics, which have their own ending to the series, were sort of like, that was the only ending we had.
Forgot about the IDW Samurai Jack comics.
Yeah, you should read them. The art sometimes isn't that great, but
Have you read them?
I've got them all. Well, I don't have the newest shit that they're doing now. The one where it's like different like versions of Jack from alternate dimensions. I've only read like 2 issues of that. That's like the thing they're doing now. But
That's weird. But maybe
the
interesting.
But the original run, like 13 issues, I've got them all collected here in a big omnibus. And they're pretty good. Most of the artists who draw for them can't draw Aku for shit, and that's one thing that drives me crazy.
That's a massive problem, considering that he's one of like the aesthetic draws of the entire. Like, you mentioned before, some fans like they're way more into Aku than they are Jack. Aku was the iconic thing from this show that I was familiar with when I was a kid. Jack himself, I didn't really realize like what his deal was until I saw the commercials. But just like reading comic books back in the day and different stuff, I saw Aku. I was familiar with that design, so that's very iconic. So to fuck that up, it's a bit like I read some Jurassic. See, I think it's a problem with IDWD because I've read some Jurassic Park comics from them, and you think one of the things that they would have to get right in a Jurassic Park comic is to get the dinosaur designs as close to the movie as you can, right? So
especially the T-Rex, because the Jurassic Park T-Rex has that very distinct, like almost cat-like look in the face, that everybody copies now.
That's part of the reason. That's part of the reason to bring that franchise back is to use those dinosaur designs in a respectful way. And they in the comics they just don't care. They try to make them look more like old movies. It's weird. The best Jurassic Park comics seemingly are the ones that came out right after the first movie, and there are no other good ones. That's the general consensus that I've seen. The ones that Topps did back in the day. But honestly, Samurai Jack, despite that art problem with IDW potentially, which it seems to be less of a problem lately. The new Ghostbusters comics all have great art, and the Godzilla comics too recently have had really, really good art, but early on that was a problem for them too. The art was a little wonky and inconsistently generic.
I would recommend anybody who likes the show to read the comics, though. The art is a problem at points, but the writing is all very good. It captures the spirit of the original 4 seasons very perfectly. There are some issues that are all action, and then there are other issues that are very funny. It's got all of that in spades. And I think with Samurai Jack especially, that was always going to happen if you were going to do it in comic form, because Gindy's style and these character designs are so specific that anytime another artist reinterprets it, it's going to look a little different, and in some cases wonky to somebody like me who grew up with this shit.
But you definitely want to try and get his style as much as you can, and then work in a little bit of your own, I guess. I don't know. It is definitely a weird thing. You'd almost be like, Gandhi, can you just do the comic too? Because
when I, an amateur, draw a much better Aku than most of the artists in this published work, that's a problem. But
that is definitely an issue. They should all feel bad.
They should feel bad. Not downing my Aku. I do a good Aku. The point, but still. They should know their shit. They get paid for this. Anyway, I don't know how we got off on IDW. I guess the only other thing to talk about with regards to the first episode before we move on to the rest of this premiere movie is that the first ever, and there aren't very many of these over the course of the series actually, so it's always a treat when we get them. The first ever Jack versus Aku fight, and honestly, probably still my favorite because it's so fucking iconic. How'd you like it? Did you feel that they played around enough with Aku's shape-changing abilities? I always loved how creative it gets with that.
Yeah, I got a better sense of that when he starts turning into like scorpions and squids and stuff. Like when he's first introduced as a shape-shifting wizard, I'm like, the shape-shifting has largely been he started as a tree, and then he turned into like a weird smoke plume. And that's been about it.
Right.
So then they start really playing with it. Yeah, no, that was all really cool.
Yeah, most of the shape-shifting we had seen before that had been basically being Giant Man. Like he would just change his size.
Right. It was a little vague, but then they definitely made it a lot clearer with that fight. But yeah, it's very cinematic. All the moves are really like each move is like its own kind of mini action sequence, and that's very classic samurai movie. You know, like everything is so exaggerated to emphasize the physical, just the physical discipline of the person pulling off the move.
Yeah, Gindi actually had actual like trained martial arts people working on his like storyboards and shit. So a lot of the
it shows.
Obviously it's a cartoon and everything's very exaggerated, but a lot of the choreography that you see in Samurai Jack, especially in like there's an episode in season I think 4 where he runs into like the Shaolin Temple and like interacts with Shaolin monks. All of the martial arts in that episode particularly is like super authentic. And a lot of it is. And then there's episodes where he's like, leaping around with a sword, just cutting shit in half. But that's, that's a different thing. But, yeah, that's all great. So then the big moment comes and Jack gets thrown into the future.
Back in time, Doc.
And now we move on to part 2.
Forward in time. I meant to say.
Yes, forward.
So we move trying to go back in time.
He is for a very, very long time. So then we move on to episode 2. Now I really like how episode 2 just, because it puts you in Jack's shoes in a way. They just drop you right into the middle of fucking Blade Runner world. Like,
yeah, I loved that really big tone shift. That was like one of my favorite things, because I was liking it initially. But had the whole show been just a traditional samurai thing, I probably wouldn't have been like oh my god, this is just like the best thing ever. I would have been like, yeah, this is good. Because I like samurai stuff, but it doesn't make me go like, oh my god, But it was when they really started to twist things in their heads by having dogs performing archaeological digs that I really kind of went like, oh my god, this is so wild and wonderful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, how do you feel about Planet of the Dogs in the future?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. Well, what I really liked about it from the general conceptual level was I've always loved the idea of mixing magic and like intergalactic sci-fi tech. And that's what Star Wars
planetary intergalactic, yeah.
Yes. What you said. That's what Star Wars has always had going for it, is that wonderful mix of the mystical and the technological, and this does it in a way where it's like our window into the future tech of space was the mystical. Like the only way our civilization got there was by Aku going, "Hey dickheads, I want to pillage your worlds too, so come to this one and we'll trade." And I just thought that was a really cool and interesting idea. And it's like this really interesting kind of, and it reminded me a lot of Blade Runner kind of trade-off where it's like we push our technology and the progress of our civilization to the point where it's like, maybe this was a bad idea.
Yeah, Aku's Earth is a fascinating future.
Yeah.
Well, one thing you'll find as you watch more episodes, Bill, and I think I've told you about this before, there are like isolated pockets of society that still use like swords and shit. Like they haven't advanced because of
It strikes me as like a West and East Berlin type of situation where there's still debris from World War II.
Yeah. So like the Spartans are still a thing. They exist. They have rocket spears, but other than that, they're very traditional Spartans. But at the same time, you've got like robot bounty hunters running around all over the place, and in some areas you have like these ancient ruins with like alien creatures living in like harmony with nature, and then in other areas it's like fucking Blade Runner cities.
There's not a lot of regular Earth people left, is there?
There are actually, but
okay.
it's very mixed. There are a couple moments.
Jack was the only one we've seen. Well, okay, I will. This was like the only problem I had with it when we got thrown into that future. I couldn't be sure who was a stylized person and who was an alien. Was there any normal people except Jack, or were they all aliens? Because those three guys who jump him initially, I was like, are these Genndy Tartakovsky's bizarre renditions of like urban people, or is this or are these aliens kind of meant to look like that, trying to like be like a weird stylized thing?
The one with like the crazy hair who wears like the orange jacket, I always thought he might be an alien because he almost looks like a wolfman or something. But the other two, I think, are supposed to be human. They're just dressed in like this weird future. Like the one had the green one with like the lava lamp on his head.
Yeah, and then the other guy's like all purple.
Yeah, there's like the little like blue purple guy who I think he's supposed to be black. But
he's supposed to be black. There's the one guy who's like clearly like a, you know, like kind of a I don't know if this is a bad word, wigger. You know, I'm sorry to bring everybody back to like 2005, playing like 50 Cent Bulletproof, whatever that game was. But that's kind of how that design struck me to come off. And then the other guy, I was like I was just a little unsure of what I was looking at, you know?
Yeah,
because there's aliens and Blade Runner stuff going around. I couldn't be sure what was what, and.
Yeah. To answer your question, there are still humans. I mean, I can think of several episodes where
when
he
you
runs
mentioned
humans.
the Spartans, I was like, okay, so yeah, there are other people out there, just not. There's a lot of aliens and dogs.
Yeah, Scottish people are still a thing. Another fan favorite character is the Scotsman. You'll get introduced to him later on in season 1. Let's see. Who else? I can think of a couple examples where he runs into Japanese people in the future, but on one of those occasions it was a ghost.
What? Say what?
No. but yeah, so they're still humans, but Aku sort of welcomes aliens. Well, there was the one part where we get to see like some aliens from a destroyed planet come and beg to be allowed to stay on Earth, and Aku's like, "I know, I'm the one who destroyed your planet."
Yeah, that was great, and he was like, "Fine, just build a statue of me every month." And make it big enough so it comes out of the ocean, and they're just like, "Kay." The one other thing was, you can feel Genndy going, "I wish I could kill people, man. I really wish I could kill people."
Yeah.
And he does a really good job of cleverly getting around it. Like, it's not to the point where you're like, "Well, this is not." Like, I feel like I should just be watching a bloody samurai movie because it's not scratching the itch. But there's that one part where Aku lasers that one alien, and then the guy's like, "Oh my god, he was just a boy, master." And Aku's just like, "He will return. He's just spending some time in the pits of hate." So he went to hell, basically, but he'll come back.
Yeah.
So he's not dead, quote unquote.
The pit of hate, for reference, is like this sort of vaguely, never fully explained cosmic place where Aku originates from. But yeah, it was very ocean dub Dragon Ball Z. Let's send them to the next dimension.
Yeah, exactly. Or like Yu-Gi-Oh's Shadow Realm.
Well, that's why throughout the entirety of the first 4 seasons, whenever you see Jack kill somebody, they always turn out to be a robot, even if they didn't look like a robot. There are times where he slashes somebody in half who very clearly isn't designed like a robot. They just look like a person or an alien. But then when he slashes them open, there's like wires and shit, and then they explode. And they just had to do that to get around the censors.
Right on. I mean, that's what they had to do back with the early TMNT show. Was all the foot soldiers were robots, but at least they explained that as like, they were all Krang's devising. Shredder was such a bad character on that show. He had no fucking weight to him whatsoever. He didn't even have proper ninjas. Like, he just had robots with guns. What the fuck?
Or in the case of the first episode, you had those Aku minions who were sort of made from his essence, so they still weren't human, and you could get away with killing them.
That made perfect sense to me. I had no problem with that. And the aliens in the bar were fine because what he was doing was cutting off they had like robotic arms and stuff. Like, it was very clearly designed so that way he could slice them up and they could get away with it. But in the intro, I can
Which, by the way, very, very Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's tons of little
very Obi-Wan Kenobi.
There are tons of little Star Wars references all throughout Samurai Jack that I noticed upon my most recent rewatch. Because obviously Genndy's a fan.
I saw a Star Wars video earlier where someone was like, because they were talking about the idea that time travel has been introduced in the new canon, and the potential of what that could mean. And they were like, well, what if old Obi-Wan goes back and meets young Dexter Jetster? And they animated it, and it's like the bar scene. He just fucking cuts his head off with his lightsaber. It's fucking great. So it kind of reminded me of that. Anyway,
what if old Obi-Wan goes back in time and tells young Obi-Wan, hey, I know you made a promise to Qui-Gon, but fucking leave the kid here.
Yeah, just leave him on Tatooine. Nobody will know.
Fucking leave him in a ditch, actually. That's probably a better idea.
Because he'll roll up and they'll be like, where's your Padawan? And Yoda will be like, oh, Obi-Wan, he lost him. It's fine. And Yoda just wings at him because Yoda hates Anakin. They talk about that a lot.
Now come along, young me. We got to go back to Coruscant. Why? We got to assassinate a senator. It's a long story.
Wild shit.
Anyway.
We were at the bar scene though. The dogs didn't love the drooling. I'm just not a fan of that kind of stuff. But the idea of it was funny. I love the Scottish dog.
I'm not even sure at this point if you're reviewing the movie or the episode or dogs as a species.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even sure either.
Not a fan of the drooling.
That's partially why I've never owned a dog, is because like I have cats. They don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
Occasionally they sneeze, and that's a little gross. But you just clean that up. Or cats puke. That's the other thing that they do more frequently.
It really comes down to breed. The ones that drool the most are the ones that we've bred so that they have the little smushed, fucked up faces.
Right. Yeah. So just against nature,
which is appealing for some reason.
Yeah, I know. Make them small and not able to survive in the wild.
Yeah, the little Scottish dog was always my favorite dog.
Yeah, he's the best.
I mean, there's British dog with his, oh, you must come help us.
Oh, he was hilarious.
The dog. But then, like, little Scottish dog is, I don't think he's up for it.
I love that moment when fucking, he has that, when Jack has just defeated all the drones at the end of episode 3, and it's like this really big emotional like end of a battle moment. He's holding up the flag, and he's like, the triumph of righteousness over the might of evil. And you're just like, oh, it's a big emotional moment. And then the dog is like, I say, what an impressive show. I just thought that was really hysterical. It was like that moment in Thor Ragnarok when fucking, they're destroying Asgard and everybody's all emotional. And then Korg is just like, this will be a haven for all creatures. The foundations will be strong. And then it just all explodes.
Yeah. You know who my favorite dog is, though, in the episode?
What? What's your favorite dog?
I'm a big fan of extras who have weird, goofy voices. That's one of the reasons I like Batman Forever so much. And there's that one dog.
That's the reason why Batman Forever is a great movie, is because of the extras having bizarre voices.
Bizarre, goofy voices.
Right on.
That's one of the reasons I like that movie. No, but there's that one dog at the end with the binoculars who sees the drones coming. He's like, Aku's drones are coming from the south. They'll be upon us by sunrise.
Yeah,
and I'm
like a Shaggy-esque dog.
And I was like, who is this voice actor? And I want to know why they made the decisions that they've made.
Yeah. Why are they like a bizarre surfer stoner dude? Hey, man, like the drones are coming, man.
Oh, jeez, Rick. The drones.
They're going up my butt. It's fine, Morty. That's where they belong.
There's so many great lines from Mako in these episodes too. I love when he finds out that Jack is back. And he's like, now you will pay for my past with your pain in the future. And you see the fucking drones crawling up the walls. Such a great scary moment because there's so many of them. And you don't even really know what they are at that point. You've never seen them before. They would become a regular fixture of the series. But you've never seen these things before, and then when they go into battle, and really the big reveal is when they stand up for the first time in the 3rd episode, because we had just seen them crawling around, and it's like, what are they going to do when they catch up to them? Then they stand up, and they've got the blades for arms and the fucking big heads with like the big snarls on it, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought they were great. If anything, what I was confused by was, does Aku really need them to run on oil? Like, well, as much as I visually liked that, like that being their filler for blood, I was just thinking these things have a lot of oil in them. Like, I thought they'd be based on some kind of more like, energy based, like, plasma or something. But the fact that it's oil,
I don't know if it's oil that they run on, or if it's more like, like when you put oil in a car to keep it lubricated. I don't know. I don't know the science. It's basically a way for Ginny
I wonder
to
if
get
I
to
wonder
have,
if Aku is like just put a lot of oil in there just so if somebody kills one they feel bad and they get all covered in gunk.
yeah. Well, basically what it is Gindy wanted a moment where Samurai Jack is covered in blood,
I know.
but he can't, but he can't kill actual people.
Right.
Oh, I love how he builds the improvised samurai armor out of like pots and pans and shit.
Oh, that was all great. I loved the plot device of having the drones heading there, and there were so many of them, and they were coming from so far away that they could see them early on enough to be like, they'll be here tomorrow morning, so they had a whole lot of time to prepare. And what I really liked about that is you have all these dogs who have been living in Aku's world their whole lives, just going, we're fucked, man. We might as well just sit here and accept our fate. And Jack is like, we probably are fucked, but I'm still going to do everything in my power to try and make us not fucked. And, I love shit like that thematically. Like, that's just something that personally always hits with me. It's like, let's just sit here and do nothing because we might as well. Well, how about we try? Like, how about we, do stuff? Like, how about we pass the hours that may be coming to our death and we, try to prevent it? Like, that's better than just sitting here going, we're all gonna die, man. Let's just be dogs.
So that's a big theme throughout the series. Jack showing up to places where the people have just given up and inspiring them to fight back in some way.
I love shit like that. And I think that this is a killer example of those themes done really, really well. And the fact that they're dogs, I just... Something about that is endearing, and... I mean, anytime you throw dogs into a fucking, bad situation, you're instantly going to get the sympathy of the audience, especially in this country. But...
Yeah. I like the part where they're like, we've recently discovered that our ancestors walked on their legs and their arms.
Yep, that was great. It felt very like the way anthropologists are still regarded now when they're like, yeah, we evolved from apes, and people are like, bah, bullshit. God forbid you tell somebody, yeah, your ancestors swam around with fins. So there's lots of social commentary in this, to be sure, and I'm sure there's a lot more of it as you go throughout the series, and I thought it was spot on.
And that's the beautiful thing about the future world that Gindy created to put Jack in. It's a world where literally anything can happen.
Yes.
You can have big sprawling Blade Runner cities in one episode and fucking Spartan warrior straight out of 300 in another episode, and it's all fine and it fits in this unique framework that they've constructed, and it allows them to basically tell any fucking story they want, and you can argue that they go a little far in a few places by the time it's all over, but there's this whole Alice in Wonderland inspired episode later on in season 2 or 3 that's fucking probably my least favorite episode ever, and it's fucking horrible.
Bizarre. But it is but like you said, you can kind of do anything because you have the crux of anything mystical and anything space related and anything time travel related. Those are your three. I guess not really time travel though, because that's the one big conceit that got Jack to where he's at. So you can't fuck with that too much.
There's a whole lot of him trying to time travel. A lot of him almost getting into a time portal and then it getting destroyed, or Aku snatching it out of his grasp, or on a couple occasions he's actually chosen to destroy the time portal because of there's a curse or something, and he wants to save the people, and so then he has to be like, I will find another way. It's always happening.
So they still have any sci-fi fantasy conceit they want to play with. And that's awesome. Yeah. And you also have this really strong emotional core of this character who we've gotten to know basically throughout their entire life. And Definitely. We've barely heard five lines from them. So they just have this really strong foundation to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah. They complete the circle when they do the 2-parter in season 3 where we get to see Aku's origins. Because at the end of that episode, we actually get to see Jack be born. So you literally see his whole life at that point. It's It's something that you don't really have with that many characters. I mean, Caesar from the new Planet of the Apes trilogy springs to mind.
They cover birth to death. Well, that's why Caesar was unique in recent film, because it was a character who we kind of, and a story we saw over the course of a lot of time. Like most movies now, they take place over the course of like 5 days, you know? Like they don't really do the whole sprawling timeline. There is no real modern Forrest Gump. Or if they do that, they're unusual films that, like, you know, they kind of stand out because of that. You know?
They usually get some Oscar noms.
Yeah.
And then they lose to a movie about fish sex.
That also takes place over a longer period of time than most movies now. That takes place over the course of like 3 or 4 months.
Does it? I should probably watch the fish bagging movie that everybody's.
It's good. It's really, Michael Shannon's great. Everybody's good in it. It's not like there's really no reason for you to not watch it. There's really no drawbacks, unless you really are afraid that you're going to be turned on by the fish fucking and you just don't want to find that out about yourself. That's perfectly reasonable.
It was one of those movies that the whole time it was in theaters, I was like, I kind of want to see this because it's a monster movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also a romance, and that's not my cup of tea. So it's like it is and isn't my cup of tea at the same time, and I don't know how to feel about that.
Well, I assure you that the parts of it that are your cup of tea will draw you into the parts of it that you think aren't, because they're interconnected.
All right. Well,
Does that make sense? Think about it from this point of view. I'm not huge into like classic literature or samurai shit, but I am into time travel and aliens. So the idea of a samurai thrown into that kind of world is very, very interesting to me.
First of all,
think of it the same way with The Shape of Water.
First of all, nice way of segueing it back to Samurai Jack. I see what you're doing there. Second of all, I'm open to watching the fish banging movie. You know, acquiring a new fetish. Who knows?
You're open to watching fish bang. That's what you mean.
Yeah.
Going to the aquarium and getting a private show.
It's really.
Can you imagine? There's just a fucking guy. Fucking the security guard gets paid $50 every night, and the guy's just like, "Let me in, let me watch him." And he's like, "All right, I'll get out." Jesus, you fucking sick fuck.
Fish sex is really boring in the real world, though. It's the equivalent of watching one person come along and plant a bunch of seeds, and then another person coming along with a water can and watering them.
It's like a woman puts an egg down, and then a guy comes along later and jerks off on it.
Yeah.
Why did that ever happen in Samurai Jack?
Well, you don't know if it did or not, Bill. You've only seen 3 episodes.
That's true. Well, I'm asking you. Give me a preview, man.
There are fish people later on in season 1.
Oh my God, there's hope.
No, but
I want to see a gender-swapped Shape of Water with Jack now.
Another aspect of Jack that we get introduced to in this premiere movie, and I don't even know if it registered with you because it was kind of subtly done.
Oh yeah, I don't notice those kinds of things. You're right. No.
Jack, for the most part, is a pretty upstanding, great guy. Like he's a wonderful character.
Definition of righteousness. They seem to. He's the ultimate white hat.
He's a bit of a Boy Scout, to be sure, but he does have a couple character flaws. One of them isn't really that big of a deal. He's kind of naive just because of the ways the way he grew up, not really having a normal childhood.
Constantly on the run and with the goal
and then
of
also
stopping an evil fucking dictator wizard.
And then also being flung into the future where he's a fish out of water and has no idea.
And he has all these old timey ideas of like chivalry and shit, and people are like, "Why are you so weird?"
Yeah, they play with that a lot. That's not so much a character flaw as it is just an unfortunate side effect of his circumstances. But he does have one big character flaw that holds him back in a few places throughout the series. They play with it a couple times. Jack actually, beneath it all, and again, this stems from his childhood trauma, has a really intense anger issue that doesn't always come out. But when it does, it's fucking chilling. And they introduce that in this movie when he like gets super mad during the battle with the BeetleBots. And there's that moment where he's just like covered in oil and he just like screams at the top of his lungs and just starts slashing them apart.
Oh, and there's that big moment where one of the robots is like gonna run away and he's like, "Oh no, there is no escape." And I actually paused it and said, "This is the most metal thing I have ever seen."
Yeah, he has a full, like, Wolverine rage-out moment.
It is very Wolverine, yeah.
And it happens a couple times throughout the series. Another great one later on in Season 1, an episode called Mad Jack. he defeats a bunch of bounty hunters, and then he shouts at the top of his lungs, "Who else wants some?" Which was actually a line that Bubbles had said in a previous episode of Powerpuff Girls. Again, Tartakovsky and McCracken, very tight.
And something that the Powerpuff Girls played with as well, where they were always like kind of too into the violence of what they did, and their professor was always like, "You're too much into punching things. You should not be like that." And then they would not be like that for a while, and then go right back to being that way.
Yeah, that's
but with Jack, it seems to be a lot more of like a serious like thing that he's got to kind of come into grips with, and it's a problem that people who do this kind of physical stuff in the real world deal with, where they get too into it and they get too emotional about it, and they can't achieve their objectives because it's not about that anymore.
Right.
It's about satisfying their own personal feelings.
And the brilliant thing about the way it's done is that it's so fucking understandable because of because of what his life has been, and the position that he's been put in. And,
I mean, it often is in the real world too. I mean, think of just any number of soldiers, firefighters, anybody.
And and a lot of times while it's happening, you're like, yeah, you fucking didn't do it. Like, you're into it with him.
But especially when it's life or death. You're like, fucking fuck him up.
Yeah, but it is a thing that will come back to haunt him later on in the series, and something that he actually has to conquer as part of his character arc in season 5 ultimately. So that's very good. It's something that I don't hear often discussed when people talk about the show, but it's always stuck out to me as like an element.
But it's a nice nuance to put into a character who achieves a lot of his objectives by slicing stuff in half. Yeah,
and it's a good lesson if you're going to have a mostly perfect character. Throw in some flaws.
Right.
There's a reason Batman's more interesting than Superman. On a character level, maybe not on like a conceptual level.
But like I said, it's especially interesting when most of what we see Jack do is physical, and like I said, we don't really have a lot of him just like kind of philosophizing verbally. So to make his to have him have this emotional problem where he gets too into the fighting, it's good shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see that developed as we go on.
I'm trying to think if there are any other elements that I want to discuss or draw your attention to.
What were they mining? That's what I wanted to know, because I thought it was something special because Jack's able to pierce the drone's like armor with it. So is it something that like Aku uses to power his mysticism? Like, what is that shit? Do they bring it back later?
That seems to be the idea. See, if you remember in the first episode, the Emperor states...
Oh, he's got them mining too. That's right.
Yeah, the Emperor states that the jewels are making Aku more powerful, and it's part of him taking over the world. So it seems to have some sort of a connection to like you said, the mysticism. There are a few moments throughout the series where there's like an enchanted jewel that has this power or whatever. So yeah. So the idea seems to be that he's in the future, and now the dogs are mining the same materials that his people were forced to mine in the past, and so he almost gets to have a little bit of revenge in the future for
those dogs are a microcosm of his people, and that's why he makes that flag with the paw prints on. I mean, he doesn't make that happens by accident, but it's a happy accident because it's a combination of him finally getting a little bit of retribution while also saving them. So that was a good moment.
Yeah. I also love the line, "Even dogs shouldn't have to live like dogs."
Yeah, it was fun. Well, I also love the bit where, he's like, dogs didn't talk, they just barked, and the dogs are like, "What?" And then one of them's like, "I knew it!" That was great. And he's just like, "No, not that they make great companions, not to insult you."
Yeah.
I thought that was funny. He's so polite. I thought that was very endearing, Like,
yeah,
that's one of the things I've always liked about Superman, is that he can take down anybody, but he's always just like, "How are you doing? Like, I don't mean to offend you." Like, he's always shaking hands and shit.
Yeah.
Like, it's very charming. And
even more
and then when they start just like fucking taking dudes down, it's all the more satisfying.
Yeah, even more so with Jack, because Superman's politeness is like down home Kansas, good old boy kindness, and Samurai Jack's is like super old school Japanese
Yeah,
etiquette
it's
kind
that
of.
chivalry kind of thing that can only come from somebody who's outside of time and fish out of water in the biggest way possible. I love that part where he starts staring at that weird alien, and the alien is just like, "What are you looking at?" And he's just like, "I apologize for staring. I do not belong in this land." And I liked that moment because like you see him having a moment where he's like, "All right, I'm going to accept that this is the situation that I'm in, and I'm going to deal with it. And I'm going to stop being just awestruck." Because we spend 5 minutes of him like just being awestruck and attacking cars. And then finally he kind of gets his bearings a little bit, and the dogs help him a lot with that.
Now, how do you feel about the fact that we don't know his actual name? And I'll go ahead and tell you this right now. We never find out either. Over the course of the 5 seasons, never find out what Jack's real name is.
I just wish we knew where the slang came from. That's the only problem I have with it. Like, it's random. Like, the dudes just start calling him Jack, and I don't know why. I get that it's like Batman Beyond future speak, and that's cool, but I just wish we knew why they picked the name Jack, if there is any reason at all. Especially because I like the implications it has thematically, like we talked about before. He's kind of a jack of all fighting styles, so that name makes sense, and I like that he picks it. But
yeah, I think using the name Jack is just like slang for like a person, like just that's like the way we would say bro or dude, calling it just being like, "Yo, Jack." I feel like that's actually something that existed earlier in the 20th century, and it's been co-opted and put into Gendy Tartakovsky's
You know
future.
what? I think you're right, because now I'm thinking back to like real Ghostbusters cartoons and like Peter Venkman would be like, "Hey, Jack, I'm Peter Venkman," and I think that Jack is just kind of a I guess you're right. So I guess that works because Jack is ultimately the everyman. He's the representation of the drive in us all to bring peace and honor to our world and everything.
And there's the old Ray Charles song "Hit the Road, Jack," which in the context of the song is probably referring to a guy whose actual name is Jack, but could also just apply to anybody because of the slang.
Most protagonists in things that are just supposed to be like anybody are named Jack, like Jack Driscoll and Kong, Jack in BioShock. He's just supposed to be kind of anybody.
Yeah, that's true. I think it works in sort of a Clockwork Orange way, where in Clockwork Orange there's all this weird future slang that we sort of get introduced to very forcefully. I mean, the movie just starts. If you read the book, I think there's like a glossary of terms, but the movie just sort of like starts, and you just have to sort of figure out what the slang terms mean as they use them. Very, very, almost like you're learning a new language. It's very organic, and I feel like that's kind of the approach they were taking here. The only problem with it, we never really hear the word Jack being used as slang again throughout the rest of the series. It could just be like a very specific thing to like that region or that city. That's
the thing. Because he decides to use that as his name, I just wanted a little more. I just needed a little more, just why that. I almost wish Jack would have done more in front of them to have warranted the name. Like, does he take down that tank, or does he just kind of survive the encounter with it? I forget.
He just climbs it to get out of that pit, but before that
he took down the cop car and he blew it up. So that was one thing.
Yeah, so they got to see him slice up some cars.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But even still, I like the idea of it. I like that. Well, I like the idea of it though. You just got these guys hanging out in the corner, just kind of accepting the world of Aku, and then they see this guy kicking ass, taking names, doing shit. Like I said. You're waking people up from the monotony of their own, sleepy existence.
Yeah, well, it's all just set up for that great moment when the dogs are like, "What do they call you?" And he's like, "They called me Jack."
Yeah.
And there's just that awkward silence. And they're like, "Oh yes, Jack, wonderful name." Yeah.
I love that moment where fucking, so they're like, "You could use a drink, man," and he's like, "Yes, I could use a refreshment." They're like, "Go right up into there; they'll serve you up." So he goes up to the bar, he knocks on the door, the 3 eye slits open. "What do you want?" "I could use refreshment." And the guy's like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" And then the 3 guys are like, "He's looking for a drink, man." And he's like, "Oh, a drink. Like, why the fuck didn't you just say so?" And then the door opens and it's a 3-eyed alien.
Yeah.
He's got 3 sets of 2 eyes. It's great.
It always kind of reminds me of that scene in
Roger
Who
Rabbit.
Framed Roger Rabbit? Yeah, where you don't realize it's a gorilla until he opens the door.
Yep.
Like nice monkey suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the gorilla. Yeah, fun.
All right, let's just jump back in. All right, Bill. I feel like we're about done, actually.
We've ringed out every nuance of we've first of all, we've done the thing we always have to do, which is talk longer about the thing than it actually runs. We've just achieved that goal, so perfect.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird situation because Samurai Jack is the kind of thing that I could keep talking about forever because I love it. But at the same time, well, we're only dealing with the first 3 episodes here, so I can only discuss a little bit of it. And also, one of the wonderful things about Samurai Jack is that the storytelling is so beautifully simplistic that when you get down into discussing the nitty-gritties, it turns into a whole lot of, wasn't that cool? Yep. And that's what this is, and that's what this has mostly been.
There's not a whole lot to critique, really. I mean, I mentioned the thing with the name, and what was the other thing I mentioned that I was a little bit not in love with? I can't even remember what the other little issue I had was, but there are a few things here and there that either aren't my cup of tea or, I'm maybe not sure about. But overall, man, this is just like a unique, cinematic piece of masterpiece animation. So more of
Definitely.
it is you should watch it regardless of if you think it's your thing. You should at least give it a shot because I think that it will become your thing as you're watching it.
Definitely.
That's just the mark of something that's just really good at world building and character building and just an efficient, engrossing narrative. And if you're looking for that, look no further.
And it's good for all ages, obviously. It's a show that was made for children, but an adult can still watch and get all very engrossed in. It's so wonderfully executed on that front. I guess the last thing to say would be: is there anything else that we haven't talked about, Bill, or that you want to address, or do you have any questions about the series as a whole, having just seen the introduction? Any last minute thoughts, concerns, queries?
If you think that it's Doctor Who with a samurai, which is kind of what I thought it was, like when I saw those initial commercials and when I heard people talking about it back in the day, it's not really like that, but it's kind of like that. like conceptually, he's not bouncing around time, but it's him constantly dealing with new and evolving situations over time. So, like I said, I just think that on a conceptual level, it's a lot more interesting than I think I gave it credit for, because we're exploring a singular world that has a lot of different facets. I don't want to be spoiled. I kind of want to just experience it, so I don't want to ask too much about the future of it.
Awesome.
Okay, I do have one thing. What year did this premiere?
2001.
Okay, that's one thing I wasn't clear on.
Yeah, 2001. It ran from 2001 to 04, and then we had fucking 13 years of desperation until season 5 came out.
Do all the seasons have the same amount of episodes except for 5?
So I don't want to hear fucking the Rick and Morty fans complaining about having to wait a year. God damn it, I waited 13 years for season 5. Yeah, I'm pretty sure every season has 13 episodes except for season 5, which is only 10. Yeah,
and they're
pretty
all
sure.
24 minutes? They didn't change the time or anything? They didn't start breaking them up into 2 like some cartoons did?
Yeah, no. Again, there are a couple 2-parters over the course of the series, and then season 5 is one continuous story.
But they didn't do 11-minute chunks.
Right. Okay, so there are 2 episodes out of the entirety of the run that are like anthology episodes where you get like a couple little short Jack stories as opposed to one full-length Jack story. So there are 2 examples of that.
Oh, okay, interesting. But those are standouts, obviously. They don't become the norm for a stretch.
No, never.
So format-wise, it's pretty consistent until the end.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of yeah. I mean, they do a lot of like really cool experimentations with that in different episodes with like animation and like lighting and all kinds of crazy shit. But as far as the basic format of the show, I mean, you described it best. it's like the Incredible Hulk with the samurai running around in a crazy future.
Mm-hmm.
And then there will be like there's every now and then you'll get an episode that's told from another character's perspective, and it's like their interaction with Jack. I can think of a couple of really good episodes that are done that way. So they play around with it a little bit, but yeah, it's fairly consistent.
Cool. Like I said, man, I'm definitely very sold on this show now, and I'm glad that I finally gotten into it, because I didn't think it was my thing really, but it's very much so my thing.
Mm.
And I think that if you give it a shot, it'll become your thing as well.
Definitely. All right, so I guess that wraps up the first installment of Samurai Month.
Watch out!
I as Bill said, I want to recommend anybody who hasn't gotten into Samurai Jack yet to go out there and get into Samurai Jack. It's well worth your time. A few episodes here and there that are maybe not the best, but for the most part, it's just an astounding series. And if you are a lover of Samurai Jack like me, and you've seen all the episodes, you watched it growing up, and you watched season 5 when it came on, and you haven't got your hands on the Blu-ray box set yet, what are you doing with your life? If you think this show looked good in your childhood, you should see it remastered in glorious 1080p, especially the Spartan episode, because a lot of that is done in like widescreen, and it's very cinematic. Oh, looks beautiful. Everybody go out and buy that shit. And next week,
spend all your hard-earned money that you should be giving to your whoever you rent your house from. Fuck them.
Fuck them. So next week could potentially be a little controversial in having been included on this list.
The DFOS fans will riot.
They might. So I mentioned in a previous video that half of Samurai Month were going to be American properties, either inspired or influenced by samurai stuff. No. And then the second half of the month is going to be like traditional, straight up, old timey, black and white samurai films. But even under that definition, I still wasn't sure about putting this next one in. But it just so happens that Samurai Month has lined up with the next X-Men movie that we have to review, and it also just happens that X-Men movie takes place in Japan and has some samurai influences in it. So it's a stretch. It's not really a samurai movie by any metric, but we're gonna talk about the Wolverine next week, because that being the next movie we need to talk about, and Samurai Month coming up at the same time just seemed too good to resist.
That I haven't seen it in full. I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I never saw it in full. So. Are we gonna we talked about this? We're gonna do the unrated version, right? Because I don't want to watch the fucking PG-13 version. Oh, the issue was you don't have that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I have that. Or... We'll talk about that.
See if we can find it online, because I would prefer to do that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Point is, the Wolverine next time. The first Wolverine movie, directed by Brian Mangold, who then went on to do Logan.
James Mangold, okay.
Did I say Brian?
You said Brian.
Fuck, who am I thinking of? Anyway.
Brian Singer?
Probably.
Did he bring you to his dungeon, Dylan? Like, did he fuck with your head? Like,
he didn't. He's just very linked to the X-Men franchise, all right? James Mangold, who hopefully isn't a pedophile. That would ruin my week. He directed the Wolverine. So come back next time to watch us
watch his movie.
Watch his movie and desperately try to justify putting it in Samurai Month.
We'll do our level best. I'll leave most of that work to Dylan though, and I'll just be like, it's got blades in it. It's good enough for me.
Bill loves it when I have ideas for videos, because then he can make me host it and he just gets to sit on his ass.
Oh, it's so good.
So join us next time. I have been Super DM64 and probably will still be in the future.
I'll continue to attempt to be Bill Worcester, a.k.a. Zazubaar.
And whatever Bill usually says, the outro.
Dylan couldn't remember the outro, but the Germans, they still heard you.
Oh, it's a podcast, Colonel Hogan? Is that...
Schadenfrei!